Good day, everyone. My name is Dr. Romerly Lises, and I am your professor for CMCS 350 Data Structures and Analysis. This is my background. I'm an associate professor at UMUC, and I'm a senior programmer with 23 plus years experience. You can see over here that I got a bunch of degrees, and I was in the service. I also like to practice Taekwondo. I'm a secondary black belt and also New Jersey State Champion in 2016 and 2017 with various specialties. I also love to dance, and I'm a middle-aged athlete. So here's a brief description of the data structures class, and it's basically to study data structures, which is a very important topic in computer science in that it utilizes objects that encapsulates any type of data, and it shows you how in different ways to develop, utilize data with these various objects. So some of the traditional objects that are used in data structures are linked lists, stacks, queues, arrays, maps, vectors, trees, and graphs. You'll also probably be performing some sorting, searching, and recursion algorithms, and these are quite important, especially as you get deeper into computer science, specifically programming. Now, the course objectives. This is straight from the course syllabus. One of them is definitely to design, implement, test, and debug data structures, and including the list of all of the objects that I've listed previously. Based on a given problem, choose the appropriate data structure that will help solve your particular problem. Now compare the efficiency and efficacy between iterative and recursive algorithms, and you'll see a little bit of that when we go through this course. And I think one of the most important things is understanding formal big O notation. Now, this is quite important in data structures, and actually, if you decide to go a little bit into programming, big O notation will be quite important. For you to be able to understand the basics of that, you can actually be conversant with other computer science professionals. So, what are my expectations in this class for you? It is expected that you know at least 2 courses in Java. Normally, if you take the CMS 350 course, you've already taken CMS 242 and CMS 145, whatever the introduction to programming class is. If you're rusty in Java, you program in another language, unfortunately, you're going to have to get up to speed in Java. This class is intensive, and you're expected to be able to produce the required programming projects that are part of this course. Now, this is a level 300 course, which means I expect everyone here to program in Java to this difficulty level. And with that being said, whatever you learn over here will prepare you for the technical interviews in the job interview process if you ever decide to go for Goldman Sachs, Google, Microsoft, U.S. Army. And believe me, a lot of these data structure concepts are actually questioned in Goldman Sachs. I actually interviewed at Goldman Sachs, and I went through a 2-day interview process, and it included a lot of data structures components, specifically linked lists, graphs, and trees, and they actually wanted me to write it down and explain it to them. So this may be important to you. If you have a good understanding of data structures, then you should be well prepared for any of the job interview processes that are out there in the market. Some important dates. The first day of the course was the previous Monday. I could not do it due to scheduling conflicts. The last day of the course is December 16th, 11:59 p.m. The last day to drop the course is Friday, October 26th, and the last day to withdraw from this course is Monday, November 26th. I urgently ask you to look at the news items. It's very important for the success in this course. Many times when I have grading issues or disputes, the student never looked at the news item. So it's very important. Please look at the news item. Plagiarism I take very, very seriously. In the last few years, I've had to handle 7 plagiarism cases specifically in this course. Actually, this is the 7th time I've taught CMS 350. For some reason, the upper management thinks I'm good with this course, so I'm teaching this course. And actually, I'm teaching 2 iterations of this course in the spring semester. Please look at the discussion and programming expectations. Read them, please. And again, I say read the weekly notes. I think that's quite important. Now, down to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about discussion rubrics. So, each of the discussions are worth 2.5% of your grades. That means there are 4 discussions, worth 10% of your grade total. Now, each discussion is 5 points. The first 3 points is your required information. The submission must contain so-and-so. I made a mistake over here. It's supposed to be 30 words of information, not including images or tables. If you submit 29 words, it's 0. I do not do partials. As I said before, this is a level 300 course, and I'm expecting you to meet the minimum requirements. Now, you must submit your discussion approximately 3 days before the due date, which is usually the Friday before the Sunday deadline. That's 2 days. And I expect you to submit this this initial submission before that particular date. If you submit on a Saturday or Sunday prior, it's 0.5 points. If you submit on Monday, it's 0 regardless of how many responses you have for the other students. Now, you have to respond to at least 2 student contributions in your discussion. They must be at least 30 words each, and they must be meaningful, useful information. If you have less than 30 words, let's say 29 words, you receive 0 points. And I said before, there are no partials. Yeah, it sounds strict, but I'm very strict about that. Here are some discussion response words that will not count. Thank you for submission. Regards so-and-so. Good job. Excellent work. Repeating everything that the initial discussion stated. Sorry I'm late for this discussion, but yes, I get these things, so I don't count those. So please be aware of that. I need meaningful discussion responses with relevant information related to the topic being discussed for this particular week. Now, here's the good part. The programming project rubric. You have 4 programming projects. They're each worth 25 points. Each of them account for 22.5% of your grade. They're due every 2 weeks. Here's the breakdown rubrics. All right, 5 points for design, 5 points. Well, I made a mistake here. It should probably be 10 points for functionality, 5 points for test plan, and 5 points for documentation. Now, for the test plan, it's quite important. Depending on assignment, it will be 4 or 5 test cases. So for the test plan, it's very important that each test case that you made over here must show step-by-step instructions on how to reproduce your required test case. Only use images to support your step-by-step instructions. So, for example, if I just see images, for me, you did not follow the requirements. I want step-by-step instructions. Please do not use tables. Yeah, tables look pretty, but I prefer step-by-step instructions. Here's an example of a good test case. Choose option XYZ from list box. Click on Compute button. See the result. It should say ABC. That's just a very simple one. Now, why do I want this? If you work as a QA analyst in a software company, guess what? You got to write step-by-step instructions so that somebody else can reproduce this step-by-step. if you decide to leave your job or something happens. It's very good to write step-by-step instructions so that even a programmer, even a QA analyst, even a project manager can read that information and be able to reproduce the functionality for that application. Step-by-step instructions are also useful when, in the event that something doesn't work in a program and you want to know exactly where the program broke. That's why it's quite important to do this. Documentation. Now, probably a lot of you are not familiar with the UML diagram. The UML diagram that we're using for this course is called a class diagram. In the documentation, it's worth 2 points out of a possible 25 points. So usually, a class diagram is like this box, and it's separated into 3 components. One, the name of the class. The second section contains a list of the variables and what their variable type is. And the third section contains their method names and the parameters. And that's all you have to do. It's helpful for designing required classes, and it allows you to interact with other people. You can actually show this between developers. A developer, experienced developer, once they see the class diagram, they understand, okay, so this is the class I have to deal with. So that is the UML diagram that I'm expecting from each one of you in your programming projects. Documentation is quite important, especially in the programming project portion. As a matter of fact, I think this is quite important because it shows you, what do you call it, how you analyze a particular problem. There's going to be a lessons learned discussion section in the documentation. And you want 2 minimum bullet points. They're worth 1 point, and I just want you to write 30 words on what you learn from each of them. Anything less than 30 words is 0 points, no partials. A good example is this. Here's one bullet point discussion. Based on my research, I found that it was pretty easy to implement the default constructor. However, I find it difficult to understand the base constructor that takes in 2 parameters. After some experimentation, it became easier to understand. That's quite simple. That's good to know. That's very good. As a matter of fact, in lesson learned discussion, you can also add information based on your big O notation. And I encourage you to do this so that you get into practice of this. The documentation can be in a Word document, or it can be in the comment section of your code. There's a comment block with class description. Now, I'm expecting a comment block in each of the classes, and it's quite simple. It's usually the top portion of your code, and it's usually commented out following the logical Java-based comment structure, and it should exist in each source code. So an example of this over here is my name, a brief description of the class, and some references. And I'm expecting this in each of the classes that you implement in your programming project. Now, for the programming project, I do compile all the source code. So if your program does not compile, it's an automatic 20% deduction in grade prior to the rubrics. So make sure your program compiles. I'm very inflexible in this. Like if this was a real-world software company, if your code doesn't compile, there's usually a job reevaluation afterwards. The breaking of a build, as what the programmers would call, means that work stops. People can't do anything. People can't develop anything. It stops business. You're talking about millions of dollars of stuff that has to stop because of somebody's code did not compile properly. So I just want you to be clear about this. Please compile your source code before you submit it to me. As I said before, uncompilable assignments are unacceptable in the workplace. Uncompilable programs cost time and money for all other workers in your organization. And I think it's good programming discipline in order to follow this. Now, in the weekends between programming project submissions, I will allow you to submit your project via email only. I will evaluate your project, give you feedback, and give you a grade for that work. Now, this is important because what happens is that you get to find out exactly where you are in your programming project, and you can get useful feedback in between submission assignments. Now, the submitted work that you have, the sanity check, must be in a condition to be evaluated properly. If you only did 10% of the work, I can only evaluate 10% of that work. It must compile. I will not evaluate if it does not compile. This deliverable is not graded, but I will give you like a grade that supposedly will show you exactly where you are in the project and how far you need to go. Sunday deadline, 11:59 p.m. Email only. Do not submit it to portal because I will assume that this is your final project submission. If you submit it on the day after, Monday, I will not evaluate. If the fortunate student manages to get 100% on a sanity check, and believe me, there are a bunch of students that have done that in the past, I'll just tell the student to submit their project via the portal. That's one less project for them to worry about. So I think this is a very important mechanism, and I think you should utilize this. Lateness. Okay, here's a good one. Discussion. If you submit a discussion after the Sunday deadline, the maximum points for the discussion is 0, regardless of how many student responses you make. For the programming project, 15% deduction each day of lateness. No excuses, and I'm very strict about that. There are valid excuses for latenesses, but they must be verifiable. Believe me, I've heard every excuse in the book. So some valid excuses are deployment. If you're in a service, I just need a copy of your orders minus any identifying information and a contact email or phone number of your OIC or NCO. If you're in a service, you understand what that means. If there's a sickness, I need a doctor's note, contact email, info of the provider, etc. Please include contact info and email or verification. So, for week 1, this is what I want you to focus on. Review the Java materials, especially if you are rusty. I highly suggest reading the week 2 content, stacks and linked data structures, and the week 1 content videos on infix and postfix expressions. A hint, projects 1 and 2 involve them. Complete your discussion requirement. Optionally, introduce yourself to your fellow students. And I highly suggest you working on project 1 by Thursday. If you feel ambitious, submit project 1 for this upcoming Sunday, 11:59 p.m. for your sanity check evaluation.